Hello, Daniel.
Hello, how are you?
Fine. Well, we started this second call. Let me share my screen to present. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to this talk. I am Lidia Morcillo, Innovation Manager from MODAC. MODAC. Sorry. Well, MODAC is the Catalan fashion cluster, is non-profit association created in 2011. MODAC is based in Barcelona and have more than 150 associated companies and entities that represent 40,000 workers and more than 2.5 million of income. The mission of MODAC is promote the competitiveness of the Catalan fashion industry, focusing on the reinforcement of the fashion ecosystems competitive in Catalonia through the cooperation with international companies and institutions. MODAC is the partner of Creative Project, a project led by ITEX, with the participation of partners from Italy, Tunisia, Palestine, Egypt, Jordan, and Spain. The objective of Creative Project is to foster value change and business alliance among the Mediterranean textile, footwear, and leather sectors through the development of several activities. One of these activities is the Mediterranean Creative Days that have two legs, Creative Talks and Creative Meetings. Creative Talks are this thematic talk within which today we do the second. Next will be on the 16th November, dedicated to the sustainability and new regulation. And the other leg is Creative Days that will on 23 and 24 of November, and we will present the winners of the contest celebrating to the project. These winners are young designers that will present their developments in textile, leather, and other materials or services related to fashion. We invite you to join us on the 24th November. And nothing more. Let me present Daniel Córdoba-Mendiola, Director of the Hunter, specialized in consumer knowledge and business strategy. Sorry. Now, Daniel.
Hello, guys. Hello, everyone. Hello, bon dia, buenos dias, good morning, bonjour. Hello, everyone. And thank you so much for inviting me to share with you this presentation. Let me share the screen. Let's make sure that you guys can see it properly. I know this is being recorded, so I also want to say thank you to the people that are not listening to us live, but are listening us from, wherever you are, whenever you're listening to it. Very warm welcome. Actually, what I'm going to be talking to you for the next 45 minutes is very grandly titled, like Insights and Tensions, but we thought that it would be interesting for you guys to get some insight on what are the main tensions that brands, companies, and consumers are experiencing right now, and how could you probably profit from this as a source of creating value for your brands, your companies, your institutions. So in order to make this talk as easy to digest as possible, what I've done is I've structured it in what I call force ideas. So you're going to see like 5 different big ideas that are related amongst them, but you can also sort of like consult this document or this presentation at your pace. So if you want to hear like the first strength idea and then do some research on yourself, and then go to the second or the third, or you just want to experience the whole talk on one go, then feel free to structure it as you wish. One of the first or the first idea that I wanted to share with you is probably one of the key points that we have seen dealing and working with our clients around Europe, around the Mediterranean, and around the world. We have been quite privileged to work with companies and brands that not only work in fashion, beauty, cosmetics, fragrance industry, but also work in lifestyle brands, and they are very much part of what's happening in terms of social, cultural, economical, aesthetic changes. So what I am going to share with you as probably the first big idea is as I was saying, one of the things that we have seen in most of our projects, which is this big idea, or this idea of transcending duality. I mean, there is a huge generational shift in values, and we see that this big change in values is a source not only to ensure that you stay or become relevant and meaningful in the market or the markets that you're operating in, but it is also a source of value in order to create your USP, or in order to reinforce your credentials in your company or your brand. So it's not only something that we believe and we share with our clients all around the world, that is something that you need to know, but it is also something you can appropriate in order to create value, in order to be able to talk to your audiences, to your markets, to your customers, and do it in a way that is meaningful and it is relevant. So we have seen in the past few years all around Europe, and in most countries and territories in the West, that there is this big change or this big shift in the way we address some of the main basics of the way that we communicate, the way that we build our proposals to our customers, our clients, our audiences, our publics. And that is that we are quite used for instance, when we do our segmentation, when we try to cluster our audiences, separate between what it is, something like as basic, we can perceive as basic as, man or woman, if it's our consumer, or if it is our client, if it is, in which life stage that person is, if it's in, childhood, adulthood, they're becoming more seniors. If it's we have a more traditional approach, or we have a more contemporary pulse in the market, there's a lot of different dualities, and we are very much used to work with those in order to structure and to create our proposals. Let me just stop 1 second. I think if you guys could probably turn your mics off, because I'm sure I can hear some back noise. So I'm sure that people will appreciate it when they're listening to this now or in the future. Thank you. So as I was saying, there's this duality that we are very much used to work with them, and then we see how brands and we see how companies and brands react to that, and how they question that, how they challenge this, and how they want to be a part of the current and the contemporary conversation by probably subverting some of these elements. So, for instance, when we saw Tiffany, I'm sure you know this jewelry and lifestyle brand, the way that they mixed in a very conscious way what we can be describing probably as high culture, and what we could describe as low culture. I mean, they were mixing in their communications, in their products, in the way that they chose to present themselves to a new audience. I mean, Tiffany was bought by LVMH a few years ago, and it had a strong commitment to change its audience base. I mean, they wanted to expand, they wanted to include other communities, they wanted to include other countries. And the way that they did it was not only talking about the product, talking about the intrinsic, but the way they did that was actually to have a shift in the way that they appropriated and the way that they approach their communication. And that was based on mixing what we would consider high culture, which we like fine arts, like in this case, you know, they were using a painting yeah, painted by Basquiat, and they would combine that with Beyonce and Jay-Z. So in our eyes now, it's because, you know, we work in the industry, you know, from our perspective, this is quite normal and quite relevant. But this is, for some audiences, it is a complete shift in the way that jewelry as a sector, as an industry would communicate, which would be mixing all these different elements and not building their messages and building their credentials based on the intrinsics of the product, that they're very expensive, that they're very hard to reach, that they're very exclusive, that they exclude certain communities. So we see this combination of all these different elements. The same thing we saw, for instance, with Balenciaga, you know, this Spanish origin, French-based luxury brand that actually combined, again, what we could perceive as high culture, you know, haute couture, you know, the those collections being conceived as something, again, very elitist, very exclusive, very a very PR operation in order to attract a very discerning kind of audience. And then here you will see how this became mixed with something that was probably way more of a popular culture background. In this case was The Simpsons. So you would see how we are shifting this sort of like high culture, or this sort of like mixing different realities that in theory, or when we, you know, approach the more sort of like common sense strategy, it would be something that we wouldn't necessarily feel that they went together. The same thing you can see with Nina Ricci. This is one of our, we've been very privileged to be able to work with this brand for a number of years. Nina Ricci, which is a French fashion and fragrance brand based in Paris, and it's owned by Puig conglomerate. It has been, is a brand that traditionally has been considered a very sort of like feminine, in a very traditional, in a very legacy, in a very sort of like almost fairy tale approach. And what they've done in the past couple of years is try to subvert all these codes. So you see that also brands that have a background in one gender or one idea of a gender, you know, they've been able to subvert all of this and start working with non-binary creators, like, for instance, Harris Reed. You can also see brands that actually appropriate codes that work from, or that come from or stem from a more craft environment, a more craft appeal. Like, for instance, I'm sure you know Zara, you know, one of the, probably the star brand from the Inditex group, the Spanish fashion and lifestyle brand. They launched about 15 years ago. They launched a spin-off of their most well-known brand, Zara, called Zara Home. And it's basically textiles, products, and objects for the home. So they did this spin-off into a whole new category. And it is really relevant and really interesting that they combined the idea of a mass-produced, accessible, affordable kind of product with codes that came from the craft world. So they're combining elements, and they're appropriating not necessarily the way that products are being created or the way that the products are being manufactured, but they do appropriate codes that, in the minds of the consumer, of a more mainstream consumer, they come from a completely different environment. So they come from a more crafted environment. So we see combinations of different worlds that subvert and break this idea of, oh, you're either, you know, like high fashion, or you're either mainstream, you're either craft, or you're either mass produced, you're either a feminine brand or a masculine brand, you're either a premium brand or you're an accessible brand. So they will combine all of these elements. And some of our audiences, when we work with our clients and we do research with our with consumers, I mean, sometimes this, which might sound very much like common sense, I mean, this is one of the hardest actually elements to, when sharing what consumers tell us, and we share this with the brands, that get to realize that consumers think of our brands and use our brands in a completely different way. So that the way that we probably deemed that is more relevant and more coherent with the way that we present ourselves. So you will see like this merging between the digital and the physical. You will see all of these elements being combined and being presented not as an exception, but being presented as a very integrated mainstream appeal that it's, again, relevant for a more contemporary audiences. So as you can see, I mean, all these elements that we have been talking about, all of this different dualities that we've been talking about actually apply to some of the key elements when building your value proposal. So when we talk about man and woman, we're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about identity. I mean, and the way, and you can see how a lot of brands, a lot of companies have made the redefinition of what identity stands for part of the USP, part of their value proposition. We're not talking about consumers or clients anymore. We're talking about dealing with need states. As I'm sure that you have seen, a lot of different fashion and lifestyle brands were very much boxed into one need state, which is either like show off or practicality of function or representation. Some of the traditional need states that are assigned for several segments or sectors within the fashion and lifestyle industry. That doesn't apply anymore. I mean, as you can see, I mean, there are a bunch of new need states, motivations that have to be considered when we approach our audiences, which again cannot anymore be divided in who's our client, who's our consumer, who's our influencer, who's our PR person. I mean, so it becomes way more liquid, as some authors would say. We're not talking about anymore about age segments or like age brackets. I mean, we're talking about life stage approach. I'm sure that you guys, you've got Disney Plus, you know, the streaming service from Disney. You've seen the way that brand, which was traditionally considered a very family / child friendly brand, is approaching or it's evolving its values towards a more life stage and lifespan role. When we talk about tradition and contemporary, we need to rephrase or reshape when we talk towards provenance, which is way more relevant. I'm sure that you know that most of the sectors, more of the industries within the fashion world or within the lifestyle world normally some of them are more or less attached to the idea of provenance, of the idea of where they come from, the lifestyles they appropriate, the styles or the behaviors that they want to embody. So there is, again, all these changes in a number of different elements. I wanted to share this with you at the first sort of like big change, because when dealing in not just local brands, but international brands, regional brands, entering new markets, entering new audiences, entering new categories, it is a key moment for us to reflect and think, how can we answer to the reality of a contemporary market that does not separate and does not have the traditional boxes, traditional different separated and very strict elements, and how we can appropriate and how can we provide an answer when things like identity, things as the way that I establish my relationship with what reality is for me, or what speciality is for me, my relationship with spaces, or the idea of what I think or where or what do I believe, the idea of ideology, or even the communities that I appropriate or the communities that I want to be relevant to. So there's this huge way or this huge number of different elements that we really need to take into account in order to ensure that our proposals are not only salient, if you've got a big budget, but they can become relevant and they can become meaningful. We've seen guys working with a lot of fashion and luxury and lifestyle and fragrance brands, that the way that they traditionally approach the reality of the segments and the audiences that they work with are sometimes way more advanced than what brands actually think that consumers or their audiences are. So I wanted to share this with you because this actually constitutes the basis of one of the main shifts in the way that brands communicate and the ways that brands talk about the value that they add to the communities or the environments that they serve, which is which I'm sure that you're quite familiar with, is this big changes in the way that we appropriate and the way that we talk about, not anymore about belonging to a certain audience, but we actually move towards identifying with certain communities or with certain lifestyles. And we are able to identify along a same consumer is not only able to identify with one reality, but is able to move along different realities and identify itself with a lot of different realities. We need to stop talking about this idea of separating between, physical and what is virtual, to this idea of an allness. I mean, this idea of a complete spatial, a complete shift in the way that we relate with spaces, and stop talking or stop thinking about, how key is our physical proximity, or how can we reach talking about the physicality and the closeness based on physical reality, to start to embody a way more idea of an emotional closeness. So this actually opens us to a lot of different occasions and a lot of different realities. These are some of the brands which I'm sure that that I've been quite lucky to have done work for some of them or talk to some of them very extensively about the way that they can be relevant in a contemporary environment. And all of these brands, as I'm sure that if you guys want to use this idea to then do some more research on that and think how to appropriate and how to include all of this in your briefs or your creative briefs or your propositions, all of these brands, these 4 brands, are quite relevant and quite meaningful in the way that they have appropriated and used some of the elements that I've explained to you before. So, for instance, Le Labo, talks of identity in a very specific, in a very contemporary way. Glossier doesn't separate between its consumers, between its clients, between its influencers. The way that they sort of like cluster the market that they are approaching is quite different, quite relevant. And I think there's a lot to learn. I mean, in your creative and your strategic processes. The second big element that I wanted to share with you guys is this, which I'm sure that you are aware, or I'm sure that you are starting to see. It is, a few years ago, it became very fashionable for all brands and companies to have a purpose, to have this concept that has become quite, present everywhere. So all companies, spend a lot of money and brands spend a lot of resources and a lot of many hours thinking about what the purpose was, what they came, this higher order that made the brands exist. What has happened, and this is something that we've seen in the past couple of years, is the purpose has become what consumers are starting to say, an empty promise. So the purpose is something that is very nice, as one client said to us, one client working in the fashion industry in Paris said to us, the purpose is basically something that you put in the lobby of your company. I mean, this is something that you print in your website, but it's normally quite empty because it's decided through a committee, and it becomes more like a semantic exercise, into, what kind of verb do we want to use? What kind of nouns do we want to use? What kind of adjectives we want to, how far do we want to go with our purpose that is strong enough to pack a punch, to be relevant to our audiences, but that doesn't actually commit us to do anything. So it's just more like a statement of intent. It's something that you want to say in order to have this sort of like high order in which you are, in which, your brand or your company, why your brand or your company is in the market today. this is dead. I mean, the idea of the purpose in the shape and form that we are used to building our shapes and our purposes is no longer relevant, and is no longer adequate. We probably need to start thinking about something that is way more compromising for companies, but it is what brands, what it is what consumers are asking, which is to talk about commitments. I mean, what, as a brand, as a company, what are you willing to commit? I mean, what are you willing to do in order to improve your environment, your communities, the society in which you're working? I mean, and this again might sound a little bit of a sort of like, oh, we're changing the word. I mean, instead of talking about purpose, we talk about commitments. It is way more deep than that, and we'll see it in the next few minutes. The purpose, in the end, I mean, it's something that it's built and it's defined as this, as I'm sure that you all guys know, I mean, this sort of like higher order reason for a brand to exist. This is extracted from one of the most, some of the most relevant marketing manuals and books. You know, is this higher order reason for a brand to exist. It has to be this sort of like ownable and actionable impact that the brand will make on people's lives, and it has to be grounded in this sort of universal truth. I mean, when you ask, and I'm sure you guys, if you've done any research, I don't know if you've asked this question, but if you do any research in the future, do ask this question if you haven't done it before. When you ask your consumers, when you ask your audiences, I mean, what does why is the brand here in this world? It is not to save the world. It is not, consumers will tell you this brand is here to sell. I mean, this brand wants to make money. So this is a very utilitarian reason why this brand or this company exists. So as fun and as nice and as lyrical that we want to put why the brand or the company exists in the eyes of the consumer, I mean, a brand or a company exists to make money. So we can disguise it and we can put it in a lovely way, and we can build this lovely sentence that we will hopefully feel that all our audiences feel very much, you know, they connect to that. But the reality is that purpose as a sentence is puts the company in the center. You know, it's centered on what the company wants. And it has to be, and most of the purposes are, and again, if you want to revisit this this talk, and you want to do it idea by idea, I strongly recommend that you go and see, you go and read, and you go and do some research on how big companies have created and defined their purpose. So it's always the company in the center. So I exist in order to something. So no matter how well I frame it in order to serve a purpose to my communities, I am always again in the center, you know, as a company. It has to be open to interpretation. I mean, there are very few purposes, and I will show you some that have actually evolved, but most of the purposes are quite open to interpretation. That's not because you know, we didn't get to find the proper sentence. That's because purposes, and you know, in my career, I've done close, I was counting it the other day, I've done close to 50 purposes for different brands and companies, all sizes and shapes, and everywhere. And most of the key markets in the world, they need to be sort of like open to interpretation in terms of that we don't really want to commit to something in particular. And this, I'm sure that you've seen that purposes are built, you know, normally purposes will have a verb, you know, indicating an action. We want to foster, we want to create, we want to elevate, we want to you know, highlight, you know, that there's always this this idea, this action idea, that it has to be, you know, by definition, it has to be open to interpretations, because these purposes have to serve many audiences, many markets, many communities, and not everyone will interpret, and not in every market all the companies will be able to deploy it in the same, with the same intensity or with the same strength. And it's basically based on a say, basically it's based on I'm saying something. So you basically need to believe me when I say this. And so it's very much based, the reason to believe for the purpose is always, or tends to always be on my future vision. It's based on what I say that I'm going to do, what I say that I've done, what I say that I am, what I say that my people that work with me say that I am. So this idea of the purpose, whereas it is an evolution from what basic strategy building for brands was in the in the past 15 years, it's still quite different to what consumers and audiences are asking for brands right now. It is for you to commit to something. So instead of putting the company in the center, like I exist for something, puts society in the center, whereas it can be a small community, a big community, a country, society as a whole, but it's not I'm in the center and I'm going to be doing something for somebody, or I want something to happen because I exist, but it puts the society in the center. It's not open to interpretation, it's open to be evaluated. So it's open, you have to be able to, whatever it is that you commit, you have to be able to share your milestones. So it has to be open to be evaluated. So you need to be able to see if that you have been committing to, no matter how big, how small it is, has to be open to be open to be evaluated. People need to be able to see and to have data and have like a proper source or a truthful source confirming that whatever it is that you committed to has been done. And again, it's not based on something that I say, but it's based on something that I do. So actually it's not so much a semantic effort, but it's not built, if you'll allow me, it's not built from top to bottom, but it's built from bottom to top. In terms of, I'm not going to build a sentence and then see how I can fill up this sentence, which is how traditionally purposes were being built, but commitments are based on capacities. What are my capacities as a company, as a brand, as a person? Let's see what capacities I have, what capacities I can improve, I can foster. And from those capacities, commitments will arise. So I want to commit to something. I'm able to commit to something. I'm able to make the effort to commit to something. And from there, commitments are something that become the reason to believe for the company to be contemporary, meaningful, and relevant in a contemporary market. So commitments, again, can be environmentally based, can be socially based, can be culturally based, can be intellectually based. We are seeing companies that are evolving, especially in the fashion industry. I know that you guys, and I've had many talks with some of you guys, I know that you are incredibly concerned about environmental commitments, environmental sustainability applied as environmental considerations. I'm sure that you're not surprised to know that most of the younger consumers that are entering the market now in fashion, lifestyle, beauty, cosmetics, and so feel like that environmental concerns are a hygienic thing. Are something that they believe that companies are doing by default. So how consumers will react, and we did a piece of research in a number of different countries a few months ago, and we talked to Gen Z and alpha consumers about what they thought about brands talking about environmental causes and the way that they wanted to highlight the way that they were concerned about the environment. And the answer was quite revelatory in terms of the Gen Z and alpha consumers in Spain, the UK, France, Italy, the US, and some of the Nordics, and some of, I would like to say, I'm not sure, but I think it was also Japan and Korea, would actually tell us that if you talk about the environment, it's that probably you're not doing something well. And you need to highlight something because you have historically not done things really well. So again, it's you projecting what you think is important, not necessarily committing into something that probably most of your younger, more tip of the spear consumers will perceive as be something that it's more hygienic. And the fact that you want to elevate those things when you communicate it is actually, serves like a different, like probably an opposite purpose to the one that you actually wanted to commit. You see examples. Obviously, Patagonia is the traditional example of seeing a brand that it's built from the commitments. I mean, it's not built. If you see all their initiatives are based on capacities. I mean, they're based on what they're able to do. I mean, and they're based not necessarily on what they say that they want to do, the vision for a market, but it's very much based from capabilities. I mean, it's very much based from capacities, from capabilities that the company or the companies may have in order to build this proposition. If we look at the first big idea of how duality is changing and how consumers are looking for a way more flexible environment and a more flexible reality in order to operate, and we see how this has a consequence on the way that consumers are sort of like putting into a question mark, are doubting a little bit of this main concept that brands and companies had, which was the purpose. Is this what's the purpose of the brand? And as we've seen for you guys watching this talk in little pills, starting on the third pill, this idea from going to from a purpose to a commitment-based proposition. Another big consequence of this shift in reality in the consumers is that consumers are actually demanding from brands and companies to do way more than it is expected or it was expected in the past. Let me share with you this little chart that we prepared, and that we have been quite lucky to actually put it into practice. So this it's not like a theoretical academical approach, but it is a reality. I mean, and we've been quite lucky to actually work with big global companies in defining what constitutes what makes a brand relevant today to not only to a more tip of the spear, more sort of like advanced consumer, but also to a more mainstream consumer. We are very used, and I'm sure that you guys listening, you all have you have a marketing background, or you're used to work with marketing people, or your marketing is your you like marketing, and marketing is your passion. We're very used to actually brands when building their proposition, when building their proposal, to try to tackle consumer tensions. What it is, the inside, what it is when you build concepts, and you have the inside, the benefit and the reason to believe. That's a traditional way of building a concept, in order to make sure that you're tackling something that the consumer needs, that the consumer sort of like feels that hasn't been tackled, hasn't been provided so far. Or if you're not in the market of solving more functional tensions, you're probably boosting motivations. I mean, what you're actually doing is trying to boost the motivation. And that used to be enough, in terms of, okay, as long as I'm able to identify within my sector, my industry, my category, my target group, my audiences, I am able to identify a tension that has not been tackled, or a need, or a motivation that probably has not been put up to date. I mean, that used to be enough in order to build something that would attract interest. And from there you would build your benefit. So from there you will build your proposition, and hopefully you've got enough credentials to make the people believe that the problem you're solving, you are entitled to solve it. So this would actually solve this sort of like the right side of the chart. It becomes a little bit more complicated right now, in order that consumers, because they've changed what they ask for in brands. I mean, brands have acquired a very central role in consumers' lives. I mean, consumers are used to brands talking about things that exceed wildly the perimeter of the products or the categories that they are working in. So they are way more, they're used to tackle some of the elements that we've seen on the first, part of this talk. So in order to build relevance, and I'm using now the model of this sort of stallions, relevance and meaningfulness, in order to build relevant and also meaningful, but basically in order to build relevant brands, what we are seeing right now is that brands are not only building from within consumer attentions, but also they are able to appropriate life tensions, like tensions that belong to our daily life. I'm gonna put an example to you. I'm gonna show you an example. It belongs to another category. It doesn't belong to the fashion world, but I think it's quite meaningful in the way that, or it's very self-explanatory. We're very fortunate to work a lot with fast-moving consumer goods. So we work a lot with food and drinks. And I'm sure that you guys, beer, you're beer consumers, you like beer, or you are, or you're part of the moments in which beer is being enjoyed. Well, beer is a traditional category that has very much tackled functional need and has also tackled a social need in terms of it is a glue, as a product, is a very social product. So it's a product that always sort of like builds, it fosters relations, it fosters sort of like a sense of community. It is also a category that it's very sort of like male skewed in terms of the way that it approaches all of its audiences. But in their main categories, on the main occasions in which beer is being enjoyed, which is normally probably after work or in having your aperitivo, before having your maybe your brunch, or there's very specific moments in which that drink is being enjoyed. There's a big percentage of consumers that don't like beer. There's you would be surprised as the percentage of people that actually drink beer without liking it, because they want to feel a sense of belonging. I mean, they want to feel a sense that they are part of the group. And if they order something, I'm sure that maybe some of you listening have experienced that. I have experienced that. I'm not a big beer drinker. And, when I'm with my friends and everyone sort of like asks for a beer, I end up well, I'll have a beer too, because if I have, like a bottle of water, you're like, oh God, you're like the party pooper, you're the person who's actually, putting this all off. But there's a big percentage of us, that don't really like beer. And I'm sure that if you go to a supermarket now, you've been to a bar recently and asked for something for that occasion, in which beer is, used to be the king, or the queen of like everyday social low alcoholic sort of drinks, you would see that there's a lot of other categories that are actually entering this space, that are actually, even in the markets where beer was being drunk because of religious concerns, because of as a low alcohol or non-alcoholic kind of drink, the taste profile is the same. You would see how a lot of other categories, like, I don't know, like adult sodas, like coffee, like cider, like a lot of other categories that are entering this space. And I'm sure that if you do some research in your countries, you will see that most of them, they're very easy to see. That's why I'm using this example, because it's very easy to see that actually all of these new categories that are entering these spaces, they're not only tackling the consumer attention, which is, I want a drink that is a societal drink. I want to be able to drink something with my friends and enjoy it. But it also, that most of them are capturing attention or necessity and insight that it's very much alive, which is the idea of freedom. I'm sure that you've seen a lot of different brands that are entering these spaces that are not only solving a need in terms of, they're not as bitter or they don't taste like beer, so they solve the right part of the chart, but they're also solving the left, because they're entering with something that it is, like the idea of freedom. So consumers, especially young consumers like Gen Z and alpha consumers, I'm sure that you guys know, I mean, the main insight in order to be relevant for them is the idea of freedom. I mean, the idea of working with creating these spaces in which they can feel free, or they can express their freedom, not give them freedom because they perceive that they're free already, but, like give them their spaces where they can express their freedoms. So they're actually being able to tackle the two of them. So I'm sure that if you guys take this into your industry, into your market, you'll be able to see the same thing. But this is a huge change in the way that brands, especially new brands, but also legacy brands, are entering this, and they're trying to answer this reality in contemporary consumers. All of this is being covered in many, many authors. Here is some books that if you want to, and some concepts that if you want to do some more research on how brands and companies are tackling all these different realities, I very much invite you to go and do some research on these 4 authors, which I'm sure that you will like very much if you don't know them already. But they're authors that give a lot of depth and nuance to some of the concepts that I've been talking with you guys so far. If we are breaking duality, if we are questioning or challenging the idea of purpose, and we are also, as consumers, asking for brands to do more and different things and to tackle elements and help us solve tensions that are quite different, and they are talking about tensions that are not only the tension that I feel that makes me consume the product or the category, but also tensions that have to do with the way that I live and the way that I present myself to the world. One of the other big elements that are changing right now, and it's again a huge source of being able to reshape the idea of beauty. What we can see, this idea of establishing new canons and reshaping the idea of what beauty stands for today. As I'm sure you know, I mean, beauty as an aesthetic category is something that has been established and has been, it comes straight out of a canon, that has been very, very strict, and it's very, very shaped, and it has a very, very specific set of rules. What we are seeing right now is that this is being broken. And again, reshaping the idea of beauty. I don't know if you guys, I'm sure you know Coty, this big fashion and fragrance and cosmetics conglomerate. They just communicated their new vision, and their new vision has 100% to do with the idea of being able, through their brands, which are almost 100 different brands, to be able to question the idea of what beauty is. This is a huge shift, in terms of how we can think about how we construct, how we present, and how we communicate our products, our packagings, our communication, our PR efforts, our conversations, our relations, our connections, our activations, all that we do as brands when we approach strategy and creation. We're very much shaped from an ideal, from a very strict and conformist idea of what beauty used to be. There is also changes and differences between the different markets, but they are based basically on the same way of assigning value. I mean, beauty as an aesthetic category is the queen of proposition. So actually, what it's beautiful, what stands for beauty, becomes the key element. And we are, as consumers, also used to, in a minor degree, to see things that are ugly and see things that work with the sublime. These are the traditionally 3 main codes in which we would shape our propositions. I'm sure that you guys have seen probably more advanced sort of brands dealing with this idea of ugliness. I'm sure that a lot of niche brands from the London scene in the 1990s and all the way to now, like Vivienne Westwood, for instance, have this very traditional relation with what ugliness is, the absence of beauty or the suppression of beauty. But what we can see doing semiotic and doing aesthetic analysis and doing cultural anthropology analysis with consumers today is that the number of colors in the box has opened so much, and we have a lot of different ways of including propositions that can be relevant for consumers. So when thinking about the way that we, that we think, the way that we construct, the way that we present, the way that we communicate our propositions, we do have a number of different elements that are now entering the landscape of our consumers. So quiche as a and I'm originally from Spain, so we could do like one session only talking about the quiche and the camp. But there are a lot of different. If any of you guys are from the UK, you are the masters in terms of parody and irony. Transgression and objection is something very much from Central European countries. The zany and the cute very much from Europe, from the US market and from Scandi market. So a lot of different ideals and a lot of different elements and interpretations coming from the aesthetic world are opening and reshaping the idea of what traditional beauty is. We will see how brands are entering another realms, and are brands that normally used to define and used to talk only about beauty, and they have sort of like set themselves as the barometer of what beauty is and the definition of beauty, are entering other territories and are entering other worlds that don't necessarily talk only about beauty. So you see, this is 2010. This is quite old, but I thought that you guys, this is again a very self-explanatory example as how to start entering other realms that not necessarily only talk about beauty. And this has caused within consumers the appreciation of aesthetics inadequacies. I mean, some things that talk about aesthetics, but in a very sort of like different ways. You here see a number of different examples that are subverting the idea of what traditional beauty is, that are playing with a lot of different, in terms of colors, in terms of composition, in terms of content, in terms of narratives. They're entering and they're communicating a lot of different elements that are widening the idea of what beauty is. You should never sort of also discount the sort of like the things that we as consumers sort of like believe, and we give them as a fait accompli, as something that this is what it is, and we don't necessarily give second thought about the strength behind what happens when you subvert this idea of beauty or this idea of codes. This is a small exercise that I wanted to use with you guys, so you can actually do it with your colleagues if you want, which is to show them this slide and ask them what it is that they what does it tell tell them this logos. I mean, when they see these brands, what are these brands telling them? And I'm sure that everyone will tell that it's very classic, very sort of like normative, it's very traditional, it's very robust, it's very, very strict. When you actually analyze this from semantic perspective, and this is how a Gen Z or an alpha consumer in Europe will see it, is it has, and excuse me, this is in Spanish, let me translate this for you, but it's got a very sort of like classical masculinity approach. It's very patriarchal and it's incredibly heteronormative. It's got a lot of authority and it's very directional. It talks about dominion and talks about security, and it talks about being very permanent and being very like timeless and being very, again, very stoic and very robust. So some of these brands, that are actually, and I wanted to put these brands for you because they are having issues entering a more wider realm in order to be relevant to a lot of different consumers. When you do this semiotics and you do this analysis of what it is behind this reality, you see that as I'm sure that you've seen when sharing this with you, that it is way more challenging and way more complicated the way that our consumers are seeing some of the traditional brands that we are offering. And as the last idea that I wanted to share with you, and it will just take me 3 more minutes and I'll be done, it is to, as a consequence of all the different elements that we've seen in the way that duality is shifting, in the way that purpose is being questioned, in the way of what it is that we are asking for brands, and how it is that brands are being able to reshape what is probably one of the totems in the creation of value in the fashion and beauty industry, which is the idea of beauty. All of these elements have had a direct consequence on what premium stands for today. I mean, there's a huge change in the way that we approach or we redefine the idea of beauty. And that is that basically the idea of what the superior is, this, when you talk about premium products, basically consumers tell that, oh, this is because it's better than, because it's superior. It's facing the biggest challenges and evolutions that has had in the 20 centuries that had existed in the West. And it is that we are very much, some brands are very much unable to tackle the different motivations and need states that have been included in what premium stands for today. So the premium today, or the heritage view of premiumness have been decoded in elements such as taste, such as elegance, and such as style, which is basically a very normative way of being able to appreciate something. So this idea of you have taste, you have elegance, and you have style, these are the three main elements that form the canon of what premium stands today. This has been changed completely. I mean, because, and I won't be reading all of this, but you can have that, so you can take, you can read all of this and do some research on your own if you want. But there are a lot of new attitudes that are completely shaking the foundation of what traditional premiumness stands in a very traditional way. You can see that a lot of different brands are reshaping the idea of what beauty stands for. I mean, it is no longer an expression of power. It has to be inclusive. It is not only something that can only be appreciated by a very selective number of individuals, but it is becoming a way wider proposition that has to be able to include a lot of different elements. That premiumness in the fashion industry was basically linked to the idea of seduction and the idea of a very traditional and codified idea of beauty. All of this is again changing. Let me go back to the previous slide, because there's one element that I wanted to talk to you, which is the idea of the show-off. This idea of the evolution of the traditional way of talking about meaning was premiumness, was very much based on the idea of showing off and exhibiting this wealth. This is changing. I mean, there are new ideas and definitions of premium that I'm sure that can be very inspiring for you guys. I wanted to put this example with you. I'm sure this is a Spanish brand, Loewe. I mean, which, if you want to do some research on the evolution of the idea of premium, Loewe is probably today in the world like one of the most relevant brands in order to understand the evolution of the traditional codes of what premiumness stands for, into be way more diverse, way more inclusive, reshape the idea of what beauty stands for, reshape the idea of heritage, origin, and provenance, reshape the codes, the formal codes, the narrative codes that the brand has traditionally used. For those of you guys who do not know this brand was created in Spain in 1852 in Madrid, and it has traditionally stand for a very conservative, traditional, stoic way of what luxury has to be. It's very directional, very, very assertive in the way that the brand used to talk about what luxury and what premiumness as luxury should be. This brand was bought by LVMH about 15 years ago, and it started to transition into a way more contemporary approach of talking about premiumness. It is a brand that within the LVMH world used to be a local hero, which is a brand that basically served has a regional approach, doesn't have a global approach. This has changed in the past couple of years. I wanted to show you guys this because I know that you're in your sort of like creative environments, to be able to be inspired by what this brand has been able to do, and how a legacy, very conservative, very traditional brand coming from a country that does not have a heritage, which is Spain, that don't have a heritage view in the world about what luxury stands for. It's not France, it's not the UK, it's not Italy. I mean, the way that it was able to come up to the market with something more diverse, more inclusive, more disruptive, and way more contemporary. This brand is having double-digit growth every year for the past 5 years, and it's becoming a tier 1 brand from within the LVMH group. And as you can see, and I wanted to finish with this example from Brigitte Leblanc, how this idea of premiumness is changing, being able to include elements and references that come from other worlds. And I wanted to finish with the same example that I showed you, or the same concept that I showed you at the very beginning of the presentation, that this collaboration between Brigitte Leblanc and IKEA done, that's about 5-6 years ago. I mean, you could see how elements from high culture, low culture, all the elements from what traditional and more contemporary views of what beauty stands for can be shaped and can be combined in something that is incredibly relevant. So 5 big ideas: the change of, reshaping the idea of duality, challenging the idea of what purpose is and what it stands for, change the way, change what we ask for brands, reshape the traditional idea of beauty, and be able to propose new avenues for the idea of what premium stands for. So thank you, guys. I think that I had about 50 minutes, so I think I've done it in 50 minutes. So thank you so much. I don't know if you guys want to, want to share your thoughts or something. I'm going to be here for the next few minutes. So thank you so much.
It seems we don't have any question, Daniel. Everything was very clear.
Okay. Well, yeah, I spoke a lot. I don't know if everything was very clear, but I did speak a lot. I was listening to myself and I thought, I'm going to fall asleep. But
no, it was very interesting. It was very interesting.
Okay. Well, if there's no more questions, I'm sure you've got my contact details. So just get in touch with me. And and thank you so very much. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Daniel. We have recorded this talk and we will upload it to the website, YouTube website of the project, Creative Project. And we will send to all the participants the link as well as a feedback questionnaire. Because we are interested in knowing how, what their impressions and what's their feedback for about these online talks that we have been organizing. And if there is no more question, hopefully we'll see everybody in the 3rd online session, that it will be on November 16. And it will be about sustainability, the new legal framework, and new opportunities. We'll send you also.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Very interesting. I'm sure. Hopefully with more images and concepts than mine. So sorry, because I'm sort of like replaying the presentation in my head. Maybe I was like, very hopeful of a lot of concepts. So I'm sure that sustainability is a key issue. So make sure guys to be in the next session, because I'm sure it's going to be really cool. I'm going to try my best to be there too.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So, well, hope to see everybody in November 16. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.